Well, hello class. Welcome to Wednesday of week 3. I'm a little bit late on the video this week, but that's intentional. In fact, I had recorded a video yesterday to upload. I sent an email. I was going to send one out on Tuesday, and I recorded it, and it didn't have the content that I wanted it to have. And I'm actually really glad that I didn't, because the video that I recorded would have missed on a really important conversation that I had with a student last night. So not to go into great detail, but I was in a pretty significant car accident earlier this year in February, and I've been seeing a number of doctors and getting treated in a number of ways for some back injuries that occurred over the past couple of months. And I was at my physical therapist last night. And it's a local physical therapist, and really enjoying the work that's being done to kind of bring this kind of healing and wholeness to my back and my neck. And I was talking with some folks in the lobby, and in walks a student of mine, a previous student of mine, who was in this course. And I said, "Remind me of the class that I had with you. Was it Understanding Vocation in a Changing World?" And the student said, "Yes, it was." And I said, "Oh, great." And so I was talking with their spouse, and just had a really nice brief conversation. And this student of mine, this former student of mine, said, actually it was in that class that I was sitting there considering and praying about what my next professional move was going to be, kind of to think about, okay, so what is it that I really feel that I'm called to do? What are my giftings, right? What are my, the skill sets and all the different things that I bring to the table? What is it that I really feel like, believe that, sense where I'm being led? What is it that I want to do next? And the student said it was in that class that I culminated all of the reflections and the processes and things that I was experiencing. I decided that I was going to, make this next move, and I'm actually sitting in doing the very thing that I resolved to do, in large part because of the class and the content that was shared. So they said, "Thank you for what you offered." Wow, what a great story in response to the experience that a former student had in this class. So not everybody's going to have that same experience, but my hope is that there's going to be elements of that where you're going to go, yeah, this was a really valuable course because it made me sit, and it made me think, and it made me pray, and it made me reflect and just take time to just be with my thoughts and the meditations of my heart and the desires of where I want to go next and the possibilities and all of that. So I hope and truly I pray that you are going to be able to look back at the end of this course and say that you had at least even an element, right, an inkling of a similar type experience to the student that I talked to last night. So again, I hope this has really been an enjoyable experience so far. This is probably I shouldn't say it's my favorite. The class is one of my favorites to teach. The content, the richness of the videos, the readings, the discussions, all of it culminating is really quite, I think anyway, a fantastic experience, and I hope and pray that you do as well. But I will say that this is one of my favorite weeks to get into the content because of where we're headed. So if you open up the syllabus, you will see, in fact, you probably already have seen this, that we are looking at calling, vocational entrepreneurship, and leadership. So, some of you may have come into this thinking, wait a second, what's a class, especially a class titled Understanding Vocation? What is that doing in a leadership program? I don't get that, right? So what is that doing there? So my hope is that, in the first couple of weeks, you start to see some connections, and that you will continue to see even more so the connections that we have to leadership by way of the content that we look at this week and in the following weeks. I just completed a course at Chico State where I did my undergraduate studies, and it was titled Tests and Measurements in Career Counseling, and we were looking at all the different assessments and the statistics and the reliability and validity of the different assessments and so forth. And was just thinking about all of the different assessments that I could present on. I had to do a presentation as part of the course, and I decided to present on the Achieving Styles Inventories, which I think you're still using in the Leadership Master's Program. If you're not, they were assessments that we had previously used. And one of the comments, even if you haven't completed them, one of the comments that I made in this final presentation that I did for the course was, I believe, and this is kind of showing my hand a little bit in the connection to leadership, said I believe that leadership and career development, so these two ideas of leadership development and career development, they're really out to accomplish similar things. So depending on who I'm talking to, I would refer to myself as a leadership coach or a career coach. But I think that those words can actually be kind of exchanged because they, in my mind anyway, they mean similar things, right? So leadership development is taking you from where you are to where you want to be. I'm developing you as a leader. Career development is taking you from where you are to where you want to be. I'm developing you from a career standpoint. And so I think that there's some parallels there. So there's some similarities. And so if I'm working to develop you as a leader, hopefully that's going to then kind of have this component that's working to develop you from a career standpoint as well. The other thing that I would say, and here's a connection to where we're getting into this week, is when we look at entrepreneurship, I believe, and I actually probably, 3-4 years ago, in fact, in the same conversation, my physical therapist lobby, the individual that works at the front desk was asking me what my favorite class to teach is. So initially my response was this course, but I remember that there was one class that I taught one time titled Leadership and the Entrepreneurial Mindset. And at the beginning of this class, and I won't go into great detail, but I asked this class 3 questions. I said, how do you define entrepreneurship? Okay. And they gave me definitions, and I said, here's how I define entrepreneurship. I define entrepreneurship by identifying a problem and coming up with a solution using, with no existing resources, right? Using non-existent resources. This idea of kind of, even as we see in scriptures, right? So I've been reading Genesis lately, and in the beginning, God created. So this idea of ex nihilo, from nothing came something, right? So entrepreneurship is using non-existent resources to create something that's in response to an identified problem, and that's then the solution. Okay, so I said, okay, good. So let's now talk about intrapreneurship. And I said, how do you define intrapreneurship? And they gave their answers, and then I said, well, here's my definition. My definition of intrapreneurship is identifying a problem and coming up with a solution using not non-existent, but now existing, because it's more internal, right? This intrapreneurial mindset. And then I said, here's the last question. How do you define leadership? And they gave me their definitions, and I gave them mine, which was identifying problems and coming up with solutions. So I said, in some ways, this idea of leadership and entrepreneurship and even intrapreneurship, they all have very similar, I think, underlying tenets that craft and create what those things mean. Okay, so when we talk about entrepreneurship, when we talk about leadership, I think that we're in some ways talking about similar ideas. We're talking about leadership, we're talking about career development. I think in some ways we're talking about, again, similar ideas. The thing that I don't think happens all that often is, do we think about entrepreneurship as a potential calling or leaning that we might have? I think there's some people that think you need to be a risk taker, you need to be kind of just this person that just has this great idea, right? These inventions in their minds, and I want to create something from nothing, and that's entrepreneurship. But going back to this class that I titled Leadership and the Entrepreneurial Mindset, I would argue that entrepreneurship is going to be more of a mindset than it is an actual going and doing. Like, you can go get a degree in entrepreneurship, and I can train you in how to, get venture capitalist money and angel investors and how to, put together a business. I can train you in all those things, but that doesn't mean you're going to be a successful entrepreneurial business person. But I think if you have a mindset, and maybe, just maybe, in this course, what we are going to talk about this week is going to get at some ideas for you that go, never really thought about being an entrepreneur, but I definitely have an entrepreneurial mindset, which goes back to, I think, leadership development, which takes us to the idea that I identify problems and come up with solutions. So I think there's some really interesting corollaries here, and I hope that you'll get into it and enjoy the content. I really like this week. I think the conversations are good. I think the reading is great. I think the videos we'll watch are fantastic. There's a book I want to mention to you. I'm going to link to it below this video. It's titled Born to Build. Okay, so how to build a thriving startup, a winning team, new customers, and your best life imaginable. The book used to be called Entrepreneurial Strengths Finder, I think. Let me grab this book. Let me go back to my... So it used to be called the I'll bring this right up here, Entrepreneurial Strengths Finder by Jim Clifton. So it's similar to what we're talking about with the idea of strengths, right? We used to use the Strengths Finder here in this course, but most students had already completed it, so we're using Standout. But this idea of entrepreneurship is not just for an entrepreneur. It's a mindset. And I think when we start to think about, there's a lot of things right there. When we think about potentially having the mindset of an entrepreneur, it helps us to connect the dots potentially in some other areas when it comes to our vocational calling. And so my hope and my prayer is that as we get into the content this week, you will be able to look at some of that, right? So there's lots of discussions. So an example of vocational entrepreneurship, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you on entrepreneurship and the common good. So this idea that regardless of what somebody thinks, believes, all those different, again, we're talking religiously and otherwise, we're still, I believe, especially as leaders, we're still out to pursue the common good of all, right? So one of my, again, I keep going back to PT. My physical therapist asked me weeks ago, what are 3 of your biggest pet peeves? And I gave him my pet peeves, and I didn't offer all of them. I'm going to offer you one. One of my biggest pet peeves is proof texting the scriptures. And as much as I appreciate and value what APU is doing in putting Jeremiah 29:11 on a license plate placard, it has definitely plucked that verse out of the context and has proof texted to communicate something that it absolutely does not communicate. Jeremiah 29:11 saying, "For another plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, plans to give you a hope and a future," in no way is an accurate interpretation of what those scriptures are actually saying. This was written as a prophecy to the Israelites who were in perhaps the worst exilic persecution in Babylon that you could ever imagine. And still God is saying to them, "For I know the plans I have for you, Israel, plans to prosper you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And I say that because if you go 4 verses prior to that, in Jeremiah 29:7, what Jeremiah writes there, what the prophecy, what it says there is, again, speaking to the Israelites, that they are to pursue the welfare of the city. And in their welfare, you too, speaking to the Israelites again, you too will find your welfare, your well-being, right? Your flourishing, your overall human well-being and flourishing. This idea that as I seek to better the lives of other people, right? So I have businesses, I create businesses, I go to work and I do a good job, I'm a good neighbor, all of these things, all that I'm to do is to actually benefit the lives of other people in my life. And so we're in these cities, right? You're in your cities, you're in your positions, you're in your families, you're in your churches, you're in all of these different places so that you can actually better the lives of other people around you. Okay, so that's what we're going to get at. And how does entrepreneurship play into that? There's actually a book called Entrepreneurship for Human Flourishing, this idea that we are to create new things to benefit the lives of other people. So you've got I think an assessment in here on entrepreneurship and some other things you're going to be looking at. I can't recall exactly. I'm looking here. You've got your weekly content wrap-up. You've got presentations that you should be responding to that are in the discussions. So you see that in the to-dos. So everybody should have their videos up today. It's now Wednesday. And so by the end of this week, you will then be responding to those to your classmates in the discussions. Okay. And then remember that we should be very involved in our vocational profile and plans. So we're already in week 3, and that's going to be due at the end of the term, and there's a lot included in there. So if you have not started on that, I'm just going to say this, I'm going to be frank about it, you're behind, okay? If you wait until the end of the term to work on that assignment, you're going to be pulling your hair out, okay? So you've got to start that soon. In fact, I would say start that 3 weeks ago or 2.5 weeks ago now. So make sure that you are on target because you're going to have to respond to what have you been doing along the way. And I want you to make sure that you have as much time as possible to focus on that assignment. It's a really important assignment, and I've actually had students that have said it's been really a transformational experience and assignment. And again, I hope and pray that that's the case for you. So keep up the good work. As I mentioned in my email, I think on Monday, I'm shooting to have everything updated as far as grades go by the end of this week. Let me know if I can help, support you in any way, or answer questions. And if not, I look forward to seeing you online.